Imagine you're a Roman senator walking through the Sabora, Rome's infamous pleasure district, when you notice a familiar figure servicing clients in a common brothel. Your blood runs cold as you recognize the delicate features beneath. The cheap makeup, this not just any prostitute. This is Valeria, Messalina Empress of Rome, wife of Emperor Claudius, willingly degrading herself for the thrill of anonymous encounters with the city's lowest citizens. Wasn't some desperate woman forced into prostitution. This was the most powerful woman in the Roman Empire, sneaking out of the palace at night to compete with common prostitutes, determined to prove she could outlast any woman in sexual endurance. You think you know about Roman decadence? What you're about to discover about Messalina will make Caligula look like a choir boy, because Rome's third empress didn't just abuse her power, she weaponized her sexuality in ways that would terrorize and ultimately seal her own horrific fate in the year 3828, what appeared to be the perfect imperial wedding. Valeria Messalina, barely 15 years old, married Emperor Claudius in a ceremony that symbolized everything. Romans valued nobility, fertility, and the continuation of divine bloodlines. She was everything an empress should be: young, beautiful, from an ancient patrician play, incapable of providing the empire with legitimate heirs. Claudius, 13 years her senior and physically disabled from what modern medicine recognizes as cerebral palsy, seemed grateful to have secured play prize. Contemporary accounts describe Messalina as possessing classical Roman beauty, pale skin, golden hair, and the refined features that marked aristocratic breeding she fulfilled her imp duties perfectly, bearing Claudius's 2 children and appearing at state functions with appropriate dignity. Roman society operated under strict moral codes that divided women into rigid categories: virtuous wives and mothers assigned the highest tier, while prostitutes and entertainers existed at the bottom of social hierarchy. An empress was expected to embody feminine virtue so completely that even rumors of impropriety could destabilize the government. The what's between public expectation and private reality made miscellaneous behavior not just scandalous, but genuinely dangerous to imperial stability. But behind the marble walls of the Palatine Palace, something far darker was developing. The young woman who smiled graciously during religious ceremonies and hosted dignified dinner parties, with secretly planning nocturnal adventures that would shock even jaded Roman aristocrats who thought they had every form of excess imaginable. The transformation began subtly during Messalina's first year as empress, when palace servants started noticing peculiar changes in her behavior. She would dismiss her guards at unusual, claiming fatigue that emerged from her chambers, wearing simple clothes that concealed her identity. Initially, her nocturnal wanderings seemed like harmless rebellion, a young woman seeking adventure outside the suffocating pratballs of palace life. But Messalina midnight excursions quickly evolved from innocent escapism into something far more calculated and disturbing. She began studying the routines of Rome's prostitutes, learning their techniques, their territories. Lance, this wasn't casual observation. She was conducting research with the methodical precision of a military campaign. The first documented incident occurred during the Saturnalia festival of 40 CE, when additional social roles were temporarily reversed and normal moral restrictions relaxed. While Claudius attended religious ceremonies, Messalina disguised herself as a common citizen and ventured into the suburban district. What started curiosity about how ordinary Romans lived became an obsession with proving her sexual superiority over professional entertainers. Contemporary historian Tacitus recorded whispered accounts from palace insiders who discovered miscellaneous deception. She had approached a brothel keeper offering to work anonymously for a single night. The proprietor, unaware of her true identity, accepted what appeared to be an aristocratic woman seeking excitement. Messalina's performance that night exceeded anything the establishment had witnessed. She serviced more clients than their most experienced workers, displaying an appetite that shocked even professionals accustomed to extreme demand. When dawn approached, another prostitutes stopped working. Messalina refused to leave. She demanded more clients, more challenges, more opportunities to demonstrate that an empress could outperform any common prostitute. The brothel keeper finally forced her to depart, but the damage was done. Messalina had discovered her true calling. Within months of her first brothel experience, Messalina had developed a systematic approach to her nocturnal activities that revealed the calculating mind behind her apparent madness. She established a network of trusted servants who would smuggle her out of the palace, arranged for disguises that completely transformed her appearance and created false identities but allowed her to move freely through Rome's underground sexual economy. But simple prostitution wasn't enough to satisfy miscellaneous competitive nature. She began organizing contests between herself and Rome's most turned-on courtesans, wagering enormous sums on her ability to service more clients in a single night than any professional. These competitions weren't private affairs. They attracted audiences of wealthy Romans who gathered to watch their empress. To yourself for entertainment. The most infamous of these contests occurred in 41 CE when Messalina challenged Scylla, Rome's most celebrated prostitute, to an endurance competition. The rules were straight. Whoever could serve as the most clients between sunset and dawn would win a fortune in gold. Roman nobility packed the venue, placing bets while watching their emperor's wife compete like a gladiator in an arena of flesh. Still, a professional with years of experience, pace yourself carefully throughout the night. She had developed techniques for managing clients efficiently while conserving her strength for the long competition. Ahead by dawn, she had service 25 lance and declared herself exhausted, but victorious. Messalina was just getting started even after Scylla conceded defeat. The empress continued accepting new clients, driven by a compulsion that went far beyond sexual appetite. Historical accounts suggest she ultimately served over 30 men that night, stopping only when no more volunteers could be found. Her victory wasn't celebrated. It was witnessed in horrified silence by Romans who realized they were watching something unprecedented and deeply disturbing. The psychological implications were staggering. This wasn't a desperate woman forced into degrading circumstances. This was the most powerful woman in the world choosing alien is entertainment. Messalina had discovered that her imperial status made the basement more thrilling, not less. The greater the contrast between her public dignity and private degradation, the more intense for satisfaction became. But these public competitions were just the beginning of miscellaneous descent into systematic perversion that would eventually threaten the stability of the entire Roman government. But if you think miscellaneous prostitution contests were shocking, you're not prepared for what happened when she decided to make her sexual obsessions permanent. What I'm about to describe will make everything you just heard seem like innocent experimentation compared to the systematic operation she was planning. Before we dive, what is the most disturbing part? Subscribe and hit that like button if you can handle what's coming next, and definitely comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I think it's incredible that people across the world are connected by the same curiosity about the darkest family into tools of manipulation and control. For an ambassadors began reporting strange regularities in Roman policy, decisions that seemed to favor specific individuals. Without logical explanation, military appointments went to unqualified candidates who somehow possessed the empress's support. Trade agreements benefited merchants who had no apparent connection to imperial interests. The empire's decision-making process had been quietly subverted by a brothel madam who happened to be married to the emperor. Even this systemic corruption was nothing compared to what happened when Messalina decided that operating in secret wasn't exciting enough anymore. By 44, Cecilia's appetite for power and perversion had grown beyond anything that could be satisfied through secret operations. She began organizing elaborate public orgies, pair of does both entertainment and political theater, forcing Rome's elite to participate in degrading spectacles that cemented her control over the empire's leadership. These events weren't spontaneous parties, but carefully orchestrated displays of imperial, disguised as religious festivals. Mussolini would claim to be honoring various gods and goddesses, requiring attendance from senators, their wives, and other high-ranking officials under the pretext of fulfilling civic duties. What began as formal religious observances would gradually transform into scenes of systemic sexual humiliation. The Empress had developed techniques for gradually escalating these gatherings from dignified ceremonies into something far more sinister. She would begin with traditional rituals, then introduce increasingly intimate elements, claimed to be authentic ancient practices. By the time participants realized what was happening, they were already compromised to object without admitting their own participation in activities that violated every principle of Roman morality. Miscellaneous psychological manipulation reached its peak during these events. She understood that forcing aristocratic men play women to degrade themselves publicly created bonds of shared shame that prevented them from later opposing her authority. Everyone who participated became complicit in maintaining the fiction that these gatherings were legitimate religious observances rather than real sex parties. The most horrifying accounts described Messalina forcing political rivals to perform with each other while she watched and provided commentary. Senators who had opposed imperial policies found themselves naked, their dignity destroyed, and their authority permanently compromised. She had discovered that sexual humiliation was more effective than execution for neutralizing political opposition, but perhaps most disturbing was how Messalina began incorporating younger participants into these events. Palace records suggest she recruited adolescent sons and daughters of prominent families, claiming their participation was necessary for religious authenticity. These young people, raised to obey imperial authority without question, became unwilling participants in their own exploitation. The Empress had created a system where opposing her fired, admitting participation in activities that would destroy entire family lines. Parents couldn't protect their children without confessing their own involvement. Political leaders couldn't expose her crimes without revealing their own complicity. She had essentially get herself untouchable through systematic blackmail that encompassed the entire Roman ruling class. Foreign observers began noting the strange behavior of Roman officials during diplomatic negotiations. Previously confident senators seemed nervous, submissive. Military commanders appeared distracted and fearful. The empire's leadership had been psychologically broken by an empress who understood that sexual shame was more powerful than military force for controlling human behavior. In 48 CE, miscellaneous obsession with power and scandal reached its ultimate expression when she committed an act so unprecedented that it shocked even Romans accustomed to imperial excess. While Emperor Claudius was in Austria, overseeing grain shipments, Messalina held a full wedding ceremony with Gaius Silas, a handsome young senator she had been pursuing for months. This wasn't a secret affair or symbolic ritual. It was illegal, Roman, complete with religious ceremonies, official witnesses, and formal contracts. Messalina had essentially declared herself divorced from the emperor and remarried to another man while still holding the title of empress. The legal and political implications were staggering, as Roman law recognized her new marriage as legitimate while she simultaneously remained Claudius's wife. The wedding celebration became a multi-day orgy that included most of Rome's rem-sing, uncorrupted aristocracy, finally forcing even her most compromised allies to acknowledge that Messalina had crossed into open rebellion against imperial authority. She had stopped pretending her activities were private indulgences or religwhat's observances. This was a direct challenge to the emperor's authority and the stability of the empire itself. Messalina's psychological state during this period suggests complete disconnection from reality. She began referring to Silius as emperor and herself as his empress, apparently believing she could simply replace Claudius through the force of her will and the compliance of her black male victims. She started issuing orders in Celsius' name and planning a formal coronation ceremony that would legitimize their rule. The young senator, initially flattered by the empress's attention, found himself trapped in a nightmare of imperial ambition and sexual obsession. He had become the focal point of miscellaneous ultimate fantasy, not just sexual domination, but complete political transformation of the Roman Empire, according to her. Perverted vision historical accounts suggest he began planning escape routes, realizing too late that he had become a pawn in her deadly game. Meanwhile, Claudius remained unaware of his wife's marriage until loyal freedmen risked their lives to inform him of the crisis. The emperor's initial reaction was belief. Even for Messalina, bigamy while holding imperial office seemed impossible. But as evidence mounted, including witness testimony and official documents, Claudius realized he faced not just personal betrayal, but potential civil war. The confrontation came swiftly and brutally. Claudius returned to Rome with loyal troops and confronted Messalina in the gardens where she was celebrating her new marriage. Contemporary accounts desu Emperor final moments as a mixture of defiance and terror as she realized her web of blackmail and sexual control had finally encountered a force stronger than shame. Imperial survival instinct miscellaneous. Execution was swift, but her erasure